Our tools toolbar, as we started going through before, is divided into the tools we'll use the most to create objects and manipulate them within our levels. Let's start with the block tool. Left click the block tool and let's go up to the top view and click and drag a box around 512, 512, any size really you want, just something we can play with. Now, with the dotted white line of the block tool, we don't actually have a solid brush or piece of geometry yet. You have to either right click on the dotted line and then left click on create object, or after you've drawn your box, press the enter key on your keyboard to create the solid object. The red lines will let you know that you have a solid object. Now, with the selection tool, the first item in the tools toolbar, you can click and drag your shape, that is your brush and hammer, around the world or your scene. It's making up your level here. To resize a brush, we can click on any of the bounding box areas and drag in any of the views to make adjustments. And you can also click again with the selection tool to get circles on all four corners, which allow you to rotate that brush in the world. You can undo a couple times, Control Z. And if you click once more, you actually get some skew controls. So you can go ahead and skew an object to your liking. Let's undo again. We talked about the zoom tool. It's pretty straightforward. The camera tool was going to allow you to actually place a camera just so we can see in 3D the object represented in our 2D views. When you first click with the camera tool, you'll place a circle that represents basically a person in the world. If we drag, this red line is going to represent that person's line of sight. So let's point that line of sight right at our box and let go. Immediately in the camera or 3D view, we get a perspective from that blue circle along the line of the object we've placed within our level. Within the camera view, we can actually move basically like you do in a first-person shooter to get a better feel for this world. Using the WASD keys to move W forward, S back, A to the left, and D to the right, you can start exploring around that 3D world. Now, to be even a little simpler and match more along the lines of a Half-Life or Counter-Strike gameplay, tap Z, that is Z, once on your keyboard to go into a mouse orbit free mode. And now you can still use the WASD keys, but you can basically fly through your level, aiming with the mouse where you want to go, just like you would within Counter-Strike or Half-Life 2. Tap Z once more, get our mouse back, and we're free to manipulate. So let's create another brush or object using our block tool. Go back to our top view, click and drag another small box, and give it a different height if we'd like, move it anywhere we want, enter to make it solid, and if we press spacebar within any of our 2D views, we can click and browse around to center ourselves up within the view. With the selection tool and an object selected, we can also go to view, center view on selection, or the shortcut is Control E, to zoom into that object we have selected. Now, in our camera view, let's click once and hold Shift and tap Z. This is going to blow up the view to full screen to give us a nice big image of what's going on. Shift Z again, we go back out. Click in another view, Shift Z, it's going to blow that one up instead. Now, let's Shift Z in our 3D view. Press Z one time to move our camera around. And let's zoom right inside this big block. It's nothing more than kind of a black void. So what's happening is we actually have a solid object that we're trying to put ourselves in the middle of, which in the real world is never going to work. So let's go back out so we can see both objects. Selection tool. Let's click the big object, and in the tools field, we'll click Make Hollow. This is basically going to carve out the middle to create walls of a varying thickness, which we can identify here, and create a hollow space that we can occupy. Asks us how thick do you want the walls, and if we use a negative number, it's going to hollow those walls outward, basically meaning that the outer wall will get closer to us. But let's just keep it at a standard 32 for the time being. Enter. Click OK. And if we go back to our 2D view, Shift Z, you're going to notice that it's actually created walls within our previous cube. Now, in the 3D view, if we go inside, W key, we actually have this lovely brick room which we can walk around, fly around, and occupy. Let's go back out, see both of our objects. You can see the one that we didn't hollow, still a black void. Okay. Of course, it's also possible to create rooms without hollowing, and for the most part is actually more efficient, although it may seem to take a little more time as you start. To do this, use the block tool. Let's move around the space bar, zoom in with our mouse wheel slightly, and let's try to replicate more or less the box that we hollowed out. Block tool, start a unit or so away, and drag a box down. We'll make sure that in our side, on our front views, that we have the right height. Enter to make that a solid object. Let's move right along. Create a new box. May have to zoom out a little bit to get a feel for where you were. And if you can't remember exactly how big you want your box to be, your brush, you can click the selection tool, the existing one, and find out that we had 544. But 544, you may realize, is actually the combined units of our sides and our wall. Back to our block tool. 544. Let's go 1 unit, 2 units in. So the combined of our two walls are going to be 544. Enter. Now we could drag with our block tool another box, the same as the first one we created here, but using our selection tool, a faster way as we continue to build will be to simply select the one wall that we want, hold the Shift key, and drag that wall where we want it to be. Now, still holding Shift, if we let go of the mouse button, we have duplicated or cloned that wall. Let's do the same with the top here. Shift, drag, and let go. Back to our selection tool. Now, in our 3D view, basically looks like we have two nearly identical boxes. Zoom inside the hollow version, out, and the version we just made ourselves. First thing you're going to notice, we have walls, but where is our floor and where is our ceiling? Now that's because in our 3D view, when we hollowed our existing cube, it automatically made all the necessary faces. But even though it may look the same, in our top view, what we're not seeing is the roof or the floor. Now, just to make things a little clearer, let's get rid of our smaller box here for the time being. So let's hide it. Select it, and we'll click up here in the red box, Hide Selected Objects. What it's going to ask is for a new viz group. Do you want to place this object in an existing viz group, or do you want to create a new viz group? Now, we could put it in an existing world geometry viz group, but then if we turn on or off that world geometry viz group, it'd be everything that's in the world geometry. Let's just start a new one. We're going to call this small box, which probably isn't the best name, but it does a trick for now. And it disappears. Now, in the viz groups, on the new object tab, toolbar, you'll see that there's this small box. If we check it, we get our small box back. And if we uncheck it, it goes away. Okay, so back to our two boxes that look nearly identical in our 2D views. What we want to do is give it a floor and a ceiling. So let's go to our block tool, in our top view, and give it a ceiling. Now we could draw our box from the far corner to far corner, but it's unnecessary, and it's going to be more geometry than Hammer needs to render when we compile. So let's start in the inside corners and drag to the inside corner. And now you'll notice we have a floor that's the right depth, but not necessarily at the right height. So within the front or the side view, we must drag that ceiling up and make it only 32 high. Drag it down and hit enter. Selection tool, we can shift drag that same floor to be our ceiling and let it go. Now we've still done a little more than we need to, because now we have this overlap between our floor and our walls, and typically that's going to be bad for the engine and a little more stressful for the video card when you got people playing it back. So let's go back to our walls and drag those in, one unit on either side, so they don't intersect with each other. On the top and on the side. Let's go to our 3D view, hit Z, and look around to see what we got here. Now, it's looking a little bit different than our hollowed out box. Click on these walls here. Drag them in. Basically what we're doing, go over here so we can take a closer look, is creating the least amount of overlap necessary. Oops, this guy here. Now the important thing to realize is that although it may look like I have basically done the right thing here, we want to notice a few things about our new box. If you get really close, it may be harder to tell with this texture, you'll notice these two walls aren't actually touching anymore. There's a space that you could use to kind of sneak in, and same on the other side to kind of sneak out. Now that may be very useful if you're trying to snipe someone from a corner, but basically in Hammer we can't have any open space touching the black void. We need to have every wall or every brush sealed completely. Otherwise we get what are called leaks. And leaks are not going to let you play your game. At least not well. So, to fix this, let's zoom in and see what's going on. Shift Z to make this a little bigger. Selection tool. And you'll notice that our side wall here is not actually touching our other side. So with this guy, we'll drag him out. And the same here. Shift Z. And we'll see that the only thing that is unnecessary about our new box is the height of each of those walls. So within the side view, we can click to lower and raise each of those walls. Now we have a box that doesn't look that pretty from the outside, but it's going to be the most efficient for the compiler to handle. And inside, when it really matters, as far as the game and the level is concerned, is identical to the hollowed out box. Now what you're saying is it's obviously much simpler to simply create a box and then hollow it out. But what makes it not as easy is when you start trying to add other rooms or objects connecting to it. Now with this existing hollowed out box, zoom out of our 2D views, holding control to make them all in unison, you'll notice that if I try to adjust the levels, we start scaling in-proportionately the edges. So these walls, which I'm scaling along the x-axis, get much thinner than the other walls which were not scaled. Now it is possible, of course, to get around this, but it's going to be much simpler to get rid of this hollowed out object, hitting the delete key. And with our piece together room, spacebar to move across, scroll in, we can much more easily move individual pieces